Tip 10. Kakeibo, the Japanese money diary. If somebody stopped you right now and asked where your last paycheck went, you probably could not tell them. And that one blind spot is the reason most people on an average salary stay broke for their whole working life. In 1904, a woman named Hani Motoko published something that looked almost insultingly simple. She was Japan's first female journalist, and what she published was a notebook. She called it the Kakeibo, the household finance ledger, and she designed it for one specific type of person, the woman running a home on a small, fixed, unimpressive income. The system has no apps, no automation, and no charts. At the start of every month, you sit down with a pen and you answer 4 questions. How much money do I have? How much do I want to save? How much am I spending? And how can I improve? Then every yen that leaves your hands gets written down by hand into 4 buckets. Survival, which is rent, food, and transport. Optional, which is the coffee, the takeout, and the impulse buy. Culture, which is books, museums, and learning. And extra, which is the repairs and the birthdays that ambush you every year and that nobody ever budgets for. But here is why the pen matters. Writing by hand is slow, it is uncomfortable, and that friction is the whole mechanism. Tapping a card takes half a second and costs you nothing emotionally. Writing convenience store 480 yen for the 4th time this week forces your brain to witness the transaction. People who keep a Kakeibo report cutting their spending by roughly a quarter without earning a single extra yen. Not because they budgeted harder, because for the first time they could see. Tip 9. Mottainai, the regret of waste. There is a word that Japanese children get scolded with before they can even read, and it has no clean English translation. Mottainai. Most people translate it as, what a waste, but that is far too weak. The word comes from Buddhist roots. Mottai means the dignity that lives inside a thing, and nai means the absence of it. So, mottainai does not mean that was wasteful. It means something closer to grief. A quiet shame that an object had value and purpose and a life inside it, and you destroyed all of that for nothing. It applies to everything, leaving rice in your bowl, throwing away a shirt with one loose button, running a tap while you brush your teeth. In 2005, the Nobel Peace Prize winner Wangari Maathai stood at the United Nations and adopted this one Japanese word as a global environmental slogan because she could not find an equivalent in any other language. But the money version of mottainai is far more brutal than the environmental one, and this is where it gets uncomfortable. Every object you have ever thrown away was bought with hours of your life that you are never getting back. The half-used gym membership was 3 days of work. The clothes with the tags still on were a week. The food rotting in the back of your fridge right now was an afternoon at your desk. Mottainai forces a permanent reframe. The price tag is not the cost is the hours. And once your brain starts converting money into hours worked, the impulse purchase becomes almost physically difficult to finish. You are no longer spending money, you are spending Tuesday. Tip 8. Hara Hachi, the 80% rule. On the island of Okinawa, there is a phrase people say quietly to themselves before they begin eating. Hara Hachi. Eat until you are 8 parts full out of 10. It is a Confucian teaching that is over 1,000 years old, and it exists because of a delay inside your own body. Your stomach takes about 20 minutes to tell your brain that it is full. So if you eat until you feel satisfied, you have already overeaten. You just have not found out yet. Okinawans who followed this rule ate around 1,900 calories a day, carried some of the lowest body weight in the developed world, and produced one of the highest concentrations of 100-year-olds ever recorded. Now apply that same delay to your salary, because your money has the same 20-minute problem. When a raise lands, you do not feel richer. You feel normal, almost immediately. The bigger apartment becomes the baseline. The better car becomes the baseline. Within a few months, your expenses have expanded to fill the new income, and you are as broke as you were before, just with nicer furniture. Economists call this lifestyle inflation. Hara Hachi calls it eating until you are full. The financial version is simple and ruthless. You do not live on your salary. You live on 80% of it. The other 20 leaves your account the day it arrives, before you have seen it, before your brain has had time to build a life around it. And here is the part nobody expects. Almost nobody who does this feels deprived, because you were never going to notice that last 20% anyway. You were only ever going to eat it. Tip 7. Danshari, the 3-step purge. In the 2000s, a Japanese organizing consultant named Hideko Yamashita took 3 characters from yoga philosophy and built them into a system that would eventually spread across the whole world. She called it Danshari. Dan means refuse, Sha means discard, and Ri means detach. Most people only know the discarding part. You walk through your home and you remove what you do not use. But discarding is only the middle step, and on its own, it does nothing. Anyone who has emptied a wardrobe and refilled it within a year already knows that. The first step is refusal, which means stopping things at the door before they ever get in. And the third step, Ri, is the one that changes your finances, because detachment means cutting the emotional need to own things at all. Clutter is not a storage problem. Clutter is a receipt. Walk through your home tonight, and instead of asking whether an object brings you joy, ask what it cost. The exercise bike was 40,000 yen. The camera you used twice was 80. The unopened kitchen gadget, the second monitor, the guitar. Every one of them is money you already earned, turned into an object, now sitting in a corner losing value. Most people who run this audit for the first time find several months of savings sitting dead inside their own house. Selling it recovers a fraction. But that is not the point. The point is that you have just walked through a museum of every buying mistake you have ever made. And after that tour, refusal stops being a discipline. It becomes automatic. Tip 6. Kaizen, the 1% engine. After the Second World War, Japanese manufacturing had a reputation for producing cheap, unreliable junk. Within 4 decades, Toyota was outbuilding Detroit. The bridge between those two facts is one word, Kaizen, which means continuous improvement. The idea was almost absurdly modest. Instead of chasing one enormous breakthrough, every worker on the factory floor was asked to suggest tiny improvements. Not the executives, the workers. Move a tool 6 inches closer. Change the order of 2 steps. Toyota has implemented millions of these suggestions, and almost none of them are impressive on their own. Together, they rebuilt an industry. The reason this destroys most financial advice is mathematical. Improve something by 1%, 365 times, and you do not end up 1% better. You end up 37 times better. Compounding does not care how big the step is. It only cares that the step keeps happening. So Kaizen money does not begin with save 50,000 yen a month. That target is why you failed every previous time, because it is a breakthrough, and breakthroughs collapse. It begins with 100 yen a day, an amount so small that failing to do it is harder than doing it. Then next month, 1 small improvement. Cancel 1 subscription. Renegotiate 1 bill. Move the savings transfer 1 day earlier so it beats your spending. Tip 5. Gaman. Endurance with dignity. In March 2011, a magnitude 9 earthquake and a tsunami tore through northeastern Japan. And what stunned the rest of the world was not the destruction, it was the queues. Thousands of people who had lost everything, standing in orderly lines for water, without pushing, without looting, and without complaint. The word for what they were doing is Gaman. It means enduring the unbearable with patience and dignity, and doing it without making it everybody else's problem. Gaman has Zen Buddhist roots, and it is the psychological muscle behind the entire post-war rebuild. Stripped down, it is also the only skill that has ever reliably predicted wealth. The ability to want something, and deliberately not take it yet. The practical version is a rule. Anything above a certain price gets a 30-day waiting period. You pick the number. You do not cancel the purchase, and you are not allowed to feel deprived because you have not said no. You have only said, not yet. What happens next is consistently strange. Most of those wants simply evaporate, not because you resisted them, but because the desire was never about the object. It was about the mood you were in at 11 at night, when the advertisement found you. But Gaman comes with a warning that most Western versions leave out, and Japanese culture is very clear about it. Gaman pushed too far becomes suffering for its own sake. Endurance is a tool for building a life, not a replacement for having one. The goal was never to want nothing. The goal is to be the one who decides. Tip 4. Shokunin Kishitsu, the craftsman's spirit. Every tip so far has been about defense, about protecting money you already have. But there is a hard ceiling on that, and Japan is honest about where it sits. You cannot cut your way to wealth on a low salary. At some point, the floor has to rise. The Japanese answer is Shokunin Kishitsu, the craftsman's spirit. A shokunin is not simply somebody skilled at a trade. The word carries an obligation, a social duty to make the thing as well as it can possibly be made, whether or not anybody is watching, and whether or not it pays more today. The most famous example is sushi. In traditional apprenticeships, a trainee can spend years before he is allowed to touch fish at all. First, he learns to wring towels, then to cook rice, then to prepare the egg, over and over, for as long as it takes. Jiro Ono was still working behind a counter in a Tokyo subway station in his 90s, holding 3 Michelin stars for a restaurant with 10 seats and no appetizers. Here is why this is a financial strategy, and not just a nice philosophy. Cutting your spending is a one-time gain with a hard cap. You can only remove what you spend, and you cannot spend less than nothing. Raising your skill has no cap, and it never reverses. A raise does not happen once. It happens every month for the rest of your career, and every one of those months still has decades of compounding left in it. So the highest returning asset available to somebody on a low salary is not a stock, and it is not a side hustle. It is becoming undeniably, uncomfortably good at the thing that already pays you. Tip 3. Mrs. Watanabe, the household chief financial officer. In the mid-2000s, currency traders in London and New York started noticing something they could not explain. Huge, coordinated flows of yen were moving in and out of foreign currencies at hours that made no sense, coming from accounts far too small to belong to a bank. Eventually, they gave the phenomenon a nickname, Mrs. Watanabe. Watanabe is a common Japanese surname, and the traders were not being poetic. In a large share of Japanese households, the wife is the finance department. She receives the salary, runs the budget, controls the savings, and gives the husband a monthly personal allowance called okozukai, which surveys have tracked for decades, and which usually lands somewhere between 30 and 40,000 yen. And because Japanese bank accounts paid almost no interest for years, thousands of these household managers went hunting for returns abroad. At certain points, Japanese retail traders accounted for a startling share of the world's daily yen trading. Ordinary households, moving global markets. Now, the part that matters is not the trading. Leveraged currency speculation is dangerous, and it wiped a lot of these households out. Nobody should copy that. The part that matters is the structure sitting underneath it. In that model, earning money and allocating money are two separate jobs, and one clearly identified person owns the second one. There is one ledger, there is one decision maker, and there is no confusion about whose responsibility the savings rate is. Most households on a modest income are not failing because they earn too little. They are failing because two people are each quietly assuming the other one is handling it. Tip 2. Wabi Sabi, the end of the upgrade. Somewhere in your home, there is something slightly broken that still works perfectly. A phone with a hairline crack, a jacket with a worn cuff. And there is an entire global industry whose only job is to make you feel a small, specific shame about it. Wabi Sabi is the Japanese aesthetic that disarms that industry completely. It grew out of Zen Buddhism and was shaped through the tea ceremony by masters like Sen no Rikyu, and it finds beauty in imperfection, impermanence, and incompleteness. The asymmetric bowl, the weathered wood, the tea room built deliberately small and plain, at a time when everybody else was displaying wealth through gold. Its most striking expression is kintsugi, where broken pottery is repaired by filling the cracks with lacquer and powdered gold. The repair is not hidden, it is highlighted. The object is considered more valuable after the break, because now it has a history. And this is where it collides head-on with modern consumer culture, which is built on the opposite promise, that things should be flawless, current, and constantly replaced. Think about what that standard costs across a lifetime. A new phone every 2 years, a car traded in before it is paid off, a wardrobe replaced by season. None of those purchases happen because something stopped working. They happen because of a manufactured discomfort with visible age. Wabi Sabi does not ask you to be poor. It asks a harder question. Did the thing stop working, or were you simply told that it looked old? Because on a low salary, the upgrade treadmill is not one large mistake. It is the same small mistake, running quietly in the background for 40 years. Last one, Ikigai, the reason you get up. This final one is the one most people have already seen, and almost everybody has seen it wrong. If you have come across Ikigai before, it was probably a diagram with 4 circles. What you love, what you are good at, what the world needs, and what you can be paid for, with your perfect career sitting in the middle. That diagram is not Japanese. It is a Western adaptation of an unrelated chart about purpose, and it has almost nothing to do with the original word. Ikigai simply means the reason you get up in the morning. And in Okinawa, where the idea runs deepest, it is usually something small: tending a garden, teaching a grandchild, being the person who opens the shop. Traditional Okinawan communities had no real word for retirement. No fixed date on which you are expected to stop being useful. Here is why this belongs in a video about money, and why it is number 1. Every strategy on this list only works if it keeps running. The Kakeibo pays off in year 12, not year 1. Kaizen needs decades of compounding. The craftsman's skill pays across an entire career. All of them share the same fatal weakness. The moment you quit, they are worth nothing. And people quit when the whole point of their life is a number. Ikigai attaches the discipline to something that does not run out. A reason that survives the bad month, the flat salary, and the year where nothing seems to grow. Income duration beats income size, almost every time. So none of these 10 ideas will make you rich quickly. That was never what they were for. They were built by people who accepted that their income was modest and unlikely to change, and who decided that this was not the same thing as being poor. That is the real Japanese art. Not earning more, refusing to let a small salary make small decisions on your behalf, every day, for 30 years.